If you're a regular at the Capcom offices circa 1994, you'd have seen a good deal of gaming history unfolding before your eyes, between the Street Fighters and Resident Evils and whatnot. Specifically though, I would like to speak on the hiring of one particular bespectacled man. A fan of trilbies and small dogs, that man was Shu Takumi. Takumi began his journey into the gaming industry acting as a planner on the 1995 video game adaptation of the anime Gakkou no Kowai Uwasa Hanako-san ga Kita, a show centered on a little ghost girl assisting school children with their troubles, usually caused by other more devious spirits. From there, he hopped onto the Shinji Mikami survival horror train as it quickly gained steam, being chosen by Mikami himself to work on the first Dino Crisis, aka Resident Evil with dinosaurs. However, as 1997 rolled around, Takumi's team briefly shifted over to Resident Evil 2 as that game struggled to find a coherent direction, before transferring back to Dino Crisis, first as director before being demoted to planner. When Dino Crisis finally launched in 1999, Takumi had well and truly proved his chops and so was given full reign as director for its sequel, which released in 2000. With a string of solid titles in his wake, Mikami saw fit to give Takumi full creative freedom to do whatever he wanted with his next title. Takumi and his team of 7 got going on a little detective-themed adventure game. This new game wouldn't stay detective-focused for long, at least not on the character front, as over the course of his 10-month development cycle, things shifted in a decidedly more lawyerly direction. And thus, on October 12, 2001, the world was introduced to the man who had come to be known as Phoenix Wright. This first title quickly bloomed into a trilogy, with the second game arriving on Japanese shelves in 2002 and the third in 2004. It wouldn't be until the Nintendo DS that Capcom considered the possibility of bringing the game to Western shores. Seeking to expand Phoenix's reach, a DS port and worldwide release was greenlit for the trilogy. It was in this form that the West finally got to know the spiky-haired lawyer and his colorful cast of hooligans when the first game hit US shelves on October 11, 2005, nearly 4 years to the day after its initial release in Japan, and on March 16, 2006 in Europe, exclusively for the Nintendo DS. This exclusivity wouldn't last, as the trilogy went on to see ports to the Wii, 3DS, Switch, PS4, PC, mobile, basically anything and everything that can run it probably has a copy of Phoenix Wright on it. My own history with the series dates back to January of 2007. For my birthday that year, I had but a handful of requests. First and foremost was the Nintendo DS Lite. Then, to kickstart my collection for what would become one of my all-time favorite systems, I humbly asked for 3 games. First was The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, second was Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, and third was Trauma Center Under the Knife. I'd recently been introduced to Nintendo Power magazine, and through perusing its pages quickly became enamored with what I like to call profession visual novels. That is, visual novels with a gameplay hook centered on a specific task or profession ranging from lawyer to surgeon to Marty McFly cosplayer. When my birthday at last came around, my dad was gracious enough to bestow upon me a red and black DS Lite and copies of Phantom Hourglass and Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All. I don't think either of us realized at the time that this was in fact the second game in the series, though to be honest, I was having too much fun yelling "OBJECTION" into my DS mic and getting thoroughly stumped somewhere around Turnabout Big Top to really care that I'd missed an entire game's worth of narrative. It was this latter bit that would prove my downfall, however, as once I got stuck, I put the game down and never went back. That is, until around a decade later when I managed to snag the trilogy on sale on 3DS and decided to right the wrongs of middle school me by finally finishing Justice for All, as well as, actually playing the first game. I eventually went on to marathon through all of the original trilogy as well as Apollo Justice, Ace Attorney, and the first Ace Attorney Investigations game. By that point I was in need of a short break after tackling 5 relatively similar games in a row and was planning on continuing, but something put a stop to those plans. That something was the announcement of the Great Ace Attorney duology finally getting a Western release. This got my brain a-churning. If the Great Ace Attorney could get a localized port to modern systems after so many years, then why not Ace Attorneys 4 through 6, or dare I hope, the Ace Attorney Investigations duology, the second of which never saw release outside of Japan. So I waited, and at last my patience finally bore fruit, as with the release of Ace Attorney Investigations Collection in September of 2024, all mainline Ace Attorney titles were at last officially available in English and on modern platforms. To celebrate both this momentous occasion as well as the upcoming holiday season, I decided to begin yet another long-form series on this channel as I jump headlong into both a quintessential Christmas game and the first entry in one of my favorite series. That is, of course, the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. And so, please enjoy as we begin this first leg of Shu Takumi's wild ride. But before we do, please allow me a brief moment to shill this channel. I love what I do here at llamelion Gaming, and it is a dream of mine to one day make this my full-time job. To do that, however, I require the assistance of all of you fine folks watching. So if you enjoy my work and wish to support me, please consider subscribing, sharing this video around, liking, commenting, all that jazz. Every little bit helps and truly means more to me than I could possibly put into words. Now, if there aren't any objections, what say we get back to Phoenix Wright? Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney is split into 5 episodes, each centered on a particular case, with the inaugural episode aptly titled The First Turnabout. This episode sees rookie defense attorney Phoenix Wright defending his old grade school pal, Larry Butz, under the guidance of his mentor, Mia Fey. This is Phoenix's first foray in the courtroom, and it's a hell of a start with Larry being accused of murdering his girlfriend with a statue of the thinker that may or may not also be a clock. It's up to us to assist Phoenix as he chips away the prosecution's case, calling out contradictions, and, just maybe, revealing the true culprit along the way. From this brief description, you begin to get a glimpse at some of the core tenets of the game's writing, namely the juxtaposition of intense situations such as murder, blackmail, and corruption, with larger-than-life personalities, pun-heavy and off-the-wall humor, and over-the-top character designs, all of which only grow more so as the series goes on. A good example of this comes in the second episode, Turnabout Sisters, in which Mia is murdered just as she's closing in on a big case, with her younger sister Maya, a spirit medium in training, accused of committing the crime. Over the course of the episode, Phoenix pieces together disparate clues left behind in Maya's wake, gaining some idea of just what was going on that ran so deep as to lead to her downfall. However, as he is still very much learning the ropes, each step in this process is a struggle. Luckily, he gets a bit of help from an old friend as Mia tags in from the afterlife when Maya channels her sister's spirit, allowing Mia to take over her body for a time. What I adore about Shu Takami's writing is that no matter how ridiculous a situation may seem, or how many jokes he flings, mostly at Phoenix's expense, he never uses humor as a means to undercut the severity of a given situation. Mia's death, for example, even in spite of her ghostly visitations, is still granted the weight losing a loved one deserves, hanging over not only this case, but the rest of the game as Phoenix desperately wishes his friend and mentor was still by his side to provide guidance. The humor and over-the-top nature of many members of the cast also helps direct the player's focus when it comes to character arcs. In the third episode, Turnabout Samurai, for example, Phoenix and his newly minted assistant Maya must defend Will Power, star of the hit kids show The Steel Samurai, after he is accused of killing his co-star Jack Hammer. While we sympathize with characters like Powers, especially as we gain a fuller picture of the events surrounding the episode, it's clear that the personalities and designs of episode-specific characters are heightened to make them more memorable. Their screen time is limited, so they're not able to dig as much into who they are as people, so the team used other avenues such as art direction and humor to get them to stick with players. We spend much more time with the likes of Phoenix, Maya, and the prosecuting prodigy Miles Edgeworth. While all goofy in their own ways, they're not as over the top in design or personality because they don't need to be in order for players to latch onto them. They're each given distinct arcs of their own, whether that's learning that there won't always be someone to pull them out of a jam, feeling useless compared to those around them, or discovering that their single-minded pursuit of justice has a potential for leading them down a much darker path. The humor surrounding these arcs and the gradual character growth we see on screen only serves to make the tonal shifts hit that much harder since we've gotten to see multiple facets of these characters. This all comes to a head in the fourth and originally final episode, Turnabout Goodbyes. It's probably one of my favorite finales in a game, always managing to get me misty-eyed, and as such I will not be delving into it further as it's one I think is best experienced for yourself. Honestly, all 4 episodes, in spite of the inevitable rough edges inherent to any team's first foray with a new concept, is a cozy little package that I think everyone should give a try. But this is not where our story ends. As I said, Turnabout Goodbyes was originally the final episode, but with the port to the DS, Shu and crew saw fit to add a 5th episode into the mix. Titled Rise from the Ashes, the 5th episode takes place several months after Turnabout Goodbyes and sees Phoenix tasked with representing head prosecutor Lana Skye after she is accused of killing police detective Bruce Goodman. As with any good Ace Attorney episode, things are very much not as simple as they seem, splitting in half a dozen different directions before coalescing into an incredibly strong ending that provides a cleaner lead into the second game, Justice for All, while also setting the stage for some of the themes the team would later revisit in Apollo Justice. My only real issue with Rise from the Ashes is that it is long. You see, in the world of Ace Attorney, the sheer amount of cases going to trial has necessitated an overhaul in the way the justice system operates. No trial is given more than a maximum of 3 days, and should a defendant's innocence not be provable in this time, they are found guilty. What this means in terms of game flow is that days are separated into 2 segments, investigation and trial. The first episode has no investigation and just 1 trial day. The second goes for 2 days, meaning 2 investigations and 2 trials. The third and fourth episodes each last for 3 days and thus have 3 investigations and 3 trials. Rise from the Ashes then introduces something that originally began with the second game, that being multi-part trial days. Now, instead of a day consisting of just 2 segments, it could have 3, an investigation, a trial former, and a trial ladder. Or in the case of the third day, 4 segments, as that day's trial is split into 3 parts. The added length almost makes Rise from the Ashes feel like its own separate game. I want to say it clocked in at nearly as long as the first 4 episodes combined for me. The size combined with the lack of build-up or mental preparation for such a beast of an episode makes Rise from the Ashes, and I hate to say this, feel a bit like a slog. Because of that, despite having a pretty fantastic self-contained narrative, every time I play this episode I find myself running out of steam partway in and just barreling through to the end. This isn't helped by some of the events feeling like filler that's only there to facilitate the discovery of a particular clue that can then move the story forward. This occurs in previous episodes as well, but their shorter length makes it less noticeable. It also isn't as obvious on the first playthrough since you're discovering these clues and plot twists together with the characters. You don't know where things are going, so every red herring and revelation is compelling in their potential to lead to something greater. On repeat playthroughs, however, the machinery is much more visible, as false leads reveal themselves to be an elaborate dance whose only goal is to shuffle characters a little further along the chessboard. Honestly, a solid third or more of this episode could have been cut or streamlined, and the pacing would have been much better for it. I don't want to linger on this point though, as doing so would distract from just how charming this game is. The characters are some of my favorites in the medium, with Phoenix and Maya being just the most delightful little goofballs bursting with best friend energy, while Edgeworth is such a tsundere, and the chemistry he and Phoenix have when he does finally begin to open up just delights me to no end. Then there's poor Gumshoe, who desperately wants to be helpful, but is just so painfully inept. And of course Emma. She's great here in her extended cameo as Phoenix's obligatory word girl sidekick in Rise from the Ashes, and I can't wait to eventually get to Apollo Justice, where she is one of the most relatable characters I've seen in a game. The graphics and presentation go a long way towards maintaining the light tone established by the game's writing. Colors are bright, expressions exaggerated, and artists Tatsuro Yamaoto and Kumiko Suekane made sure each character's design was tailored to make them stand out against the rest of the cast, while also highlighting various aspects of their personalities. Red White's ostentatious pink suit and diamond brooch, for example, show at a glance how superficial he is, all glitz, no depth. Meanwhile, Cody Hackins is decked out in lime green steel samurai gear, loudly proclaiming his adoration for his favorite hero, even as he initially refuses to give Phoenix the time of day. Speaking of our main crew, not unlike how they're written, in design they're a bit more subdued. There's less need for an immediate striking impression since we'll get to know them over the long term. That's not to say they aren't memorable. Phoenix's trademark sonic hairstyle and color scheme, Edgeworth's haughty demeanor and ruffles, and of course Maya's spirit medium guard are integral to who these characters are, to the point that removing them can make them nigh unrecognizable. See Phoenix's fit in Apollo Justice. In addition, their various reaction sprites add tons of personality and go a long way towards fleshing them out. This holds true for the entire cast. One of my favorite parts of any episode is seeing how explosive a character becomes when caught in contradiction on the witness stand. But again, the best is saved for the main crew, from Phoenix's nervous sweating and doofy smile, to Maya's puffed up cheeks and mouth foaming in shock, to Edgeworth calmly shaking his head and being brought to one arm when faced with the unexpected. Each one is a microcosm of characterization, highlighting how, say, Phoenix is constantly barely scraping by, Maya can't help but wear her emotions on her sleeve, and Edgeworth is a cool operator only so long as things are going according to plan. But graphics are only half of the presentation equation, with the other being sound, and oh my goodness, the sound in this game. I'm not just talking about the music, which I will get to, trust me, but also the sound effects. I don't typically talk sound effects, mostly because by and large, when sound effects are good, they bleed into the rest of the experience and only stand out if they are particularly excellent or particularly awful. Which kinda sucks, since good sound design requires an immense amount of time and effort, and good sound designers are woefully underappreciated. Here the sound effects are as much a part of the experience as the animation and music, from the slap of hands on a table, to each character specific objection, to the stamp of the judge's gravel, to the digitized typewriter accompanying text appearing on screen. Just listing them out here feels lacking when attempting to communicate their impact, as each is so highly specific to this game and series that it wouldn't surprise me if any Phoenix Wright fan would instantly recognize them out in the wild. But now for the music. Oh, I love this soundtrack so much, you guys. Masakazu Sugimori and Naoto Tanaka's compositions are just so darn bouncy and energetic. The day-to-day investigation themes keep things upbeat even as you comb through crime scenes and question witnesses. The pursuit theme ups the tempo, sending adrenaline flowing as you work to corner each episode's culprit. There's no question that the best of the bunch for me is Turnabout Sisters Ballad. There are a handful of songs that, even divorced from context, still make me feel some capital E emotions just based on their compositions alone, and this is one of them. I adore both this song and the two sisters' titles referred to with all of my heart. This is normally where I would end this section, but I need to mention one more song. The police in the Ace Attorney universe have a mascot by the name of the Blue Badger. Rise from the Ashes, this little guy gets his own theme. It's not particularly noteworthy, a little carnival-esque ditty that plays occasionally when the Badger is being discussed. That is, except for one occasion late in the episode where it plays on loop during a puzzle. I had some trouble getting the puzzle right and thus suffered through this theme to the point that I felt like I was going insane. As briefly touched upon in the narrative section, gameplay is split into two distinct parts, investigations and trials. During investigations, the game becomes much more point-and-click adventure. You guide Phoenix from location to location, scouring the environment for clues and running through dialogue options for whoever you run into. Each major piece of evidence you find gets entered into the court record and can be brought up during the investigation to trigger new lines of dialogue or during trials when calling out contradictions. I mentioned in my Snatch review how that game shows its age in the way it doesn't feature any indicators as to whether or not dialogue and search options have been exhausted, and luckily that's not the case here. Both dialogue and interactable elements in the environment display a checkmark next to them once you've gone through all of their available dialogue. There are times where showing a character a particular item from the court record will either refresh their dialogue options or add additional ones. The game generally leaves it up to you to discover when this is necessary, but characters like Maya will provide hints to help put you on the right track. Phoenix Wright also bypasses the classic adventure game headache that is pixel hunting, as when examining the environment, the cursor takes the form of a little magnifying glass that turns yellow when hovering over something you can interact with. It all makes for a streamlined, user-friendly experience that provides tools aplenty to ensure players don't get stuck without simply handing them the answers. The one issue I had in this regard was how each new investigation segment in the same episode refreshes all objects in the environment, implying there is new dialogue. Some do receive new dialogue, so I imagine the total refresh was done to keep players from just skipping around and only interacting with the stuff that hadn't refreshed. The system can lead to some repeated exchanges, especially on a first playthrough when you're less certain what direction the case is going and where your focus should be. Overall, it's fairly minimal, and there are dialogue skip options available. The trials, meanwhile, lean much more visual novel. Linear, conversation-driven affairs only broken up by the occasional need to flip through evidence in the court record to point out a contradiction. There's a fairly consistent pattern to trials, wherein the prosecution calls a witness who provides their testimony, then Phoenix goes through said testimony line by line before pressing the witness for more details. Should a contradiction exist, which it usually does, it's time to go into the court record and find some evidence to help point it out. It's a system with a constant sense of building tension and momentum. Each press of a statement and contradiction found actively pushes the trial forward as new details emerge, lies are tossed out, and the truth gradually becomes clear. It's also in these segments where the potential for failure exists. In the upper right hand corner of the screen sits a little life bar of sorts. Present the wrong piece of evidence or ask the wrong question and the bar will slowly chip away. When it runs out, that's game over and your client is found guilty. This isn't really much of an issue. The first 4 episodes might see the odds stumble, but are straightforward enough that a game over should be difficult to achieve. The 5th episode does ramp things up quite a bit, so if a game over is seen, it'll most likely be here. Thankfully, the bar refills after each trial segment, and you can save and reload at any time, so save scumming is always a viable option if you find yourself stuck. And of course, there's walkthroughs and guides. Over my many years playing games, I've formulated a little category in my mind for what I have deemed perfect games. They're not titles without fault or that I think everyone will enjoy, but rather games that I see as having such a focused, singular vision that they execute on to such a degree that they are a perfect encapsulation of the experience they're seeking to convey. The original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney is one such game, and it also happens to be a title I unabashedly love. Even here in its first outing, all of the qualities that would come to contribute to the series' longevity are present and fully formed, from the endearing personalities, to the quirky sense of humor, to the surprisingly touching storytelling. I cannot recommend this game and series highly enough. It might be one of the best intros to the visual novel genre. The investigations and trials are punctuated with enough player direction and input that I can see it being a good way to ease folks into the text-heavy nature of visual novels. It's also a fantastic watch if you're more inclined to go that route, and thankfully there's no shortage of quality Let's Plays and the like out there. Regardless of how you engage with it, there's no better time to jump in, what with every mainline entry being widely available on modern platforms. Mayhaps Capcom will even grace us with a new entry one of these days. Hell, while I'm dreaming, let's get Shutakmi back on for a numbered entry. Whether that fabled day arrives sooner or later, I'll be eating good in the meantime, as I've still got a smorgasbord of cases waiting on my desk just begging for me to get to them. And I will. Eventually. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. It's always a joy to revisit the first Phoenix Wright, even if I'm still somehow consistently blindsided by just how Lord Rise from the Ashes is. I don't typically replay games all that much, but this was actually my third or fourth time going through this one. It's kind of become one of my gaming comfort foods. Something I can just flip on, sit back, and soak up the cozy vibes. And returning always feels like I'm visiting old friends. With all that said, as always, please take care of yourselves. Phoenix Wright and crew can be a bit on the noisy side, so next time I think I'll opt for something a little quieter. You might even say, silent.